Dangerous Alliance was one of the best factions ever in pro wrestling history. Stunning
Yeah.
Steve Austin. He had
It
great
just
matches with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
yeah. See, it was just I got introduced to Steve Austin as Stone Cold, so it's really hard to look back after that. You know what I mean? When you get in
Oh,
on
as
that
many
floor,
have.
yeah,
Especially now with the generation after us. That's
yeah,
all they're ever going to know of him, you
yep.
know? And rightfully so. Don't get me wrong. Nothing he did in
Unless Vince
NWA,
inducts the
WCW
Hollywood
was that big.
Blondes to the Hall of Fame, I'd love to see him come out with a wig. That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Him and BPJ or Brian Pillman Jr.
Oh, and as you say that, I can't leave this without mentioning the big rumor that was right up there with the it was right up there with the Marilyn Manson removing his ribs to suck his own dick rumor, was that Stone Cold Steve Austin went from WCW with long hair into ECW, and then in a fire match had his hair burned off, and that's why he was bald in WWE. I believed that for a couple years, and I actually looked forever in the tape trading circuit to find that tape before I realized that was bullshit. He just shaved his fucking head. How fucking dumb.
Yeah.
But we were dumb. We like being dumb.
Oh yeah.
But we got two people who are not dumb, and one of them is a blonde, and that was the team known as Suri Taylor, or Sarita and Taylor Wilde. They were in Impact Wrestling initially. That's where they got their name. Basically, they were the very first ever Knockouts Tag Team Champions. And, you know, this is before women tag teams were kind of a thing. They were also former Women Superstar Uncensored Tag Team Champions. Now, to be honest, they weren't together very long, as Taylor Wilde would leave shortly after they got the tag team championships, with Sarita following a couple years later. But their impact in Impact, again, no pun intended, and the fact that they were the very
I think
first...
that pun was very intended.
Okay, it was actually. But the fact that they were the very first female tag team champs for a major promotion in the current era, I feel deserves more recognition than they get at all, especially when people talk about the women's evolution, revolution, devolution, nevolution, whatever they say. You never hear about that.
The women's Nevolution just makes me think of Neville in a dress.
That's awesome. And I don't have a lot to say about these two, other than I do want to mention that poor Sarita was just recently released with the latest WWE cuts. Her real name is Sarah Stock. So we wish her the best. We'll get into that later on in the news segment, but figured if we're talking about her, we should mention it.
Yeah.
And then next, Pasty, I have a group here that I think very few people listening to this are going to know, and not because they were an under-the-radar team or a group that was in some outlaw territory. No. In fact, Stevens and Patterson, composed of Ray the Crippler Stevens and Pat Patterson, much attention was actually given to them during their heyday, often considered one of the best teams in the world. But as time moved on, less and less of this duo, and they got less and less mentions by the historians and by the various pro wrestling groups. The AWA and the NWA, which they were big in, all kind of dwindled away. Then you add to that, Pat Patterson's turn as Vinnie Mac's stooge in the Attitude Era kind of became what most fans thought of good old PP.
Yeah, old Pat and Jerry.
Exactly. But when we talk about Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, they were tag team champions in NWA, NWA Japan, AWA, Pacific Northwest, Stampede Wrestling, and NWA Canada. And at the time, believe it or not, Stevens was the main event guy. He was this star that was helping to build Pat Patterson. And today's fans only know Pat Patterson, not Ray Stevens. And sadly, we're moving on to a generation that may not even know Pat Patterson.
Yeah. Both amazing wrestlers for their time.
I definitely recommend hitting up the WWE Network and looking up some AWA matches with Stevens and Patterson, because they, in historians' minds, they're going to go down as two of the best ever, ever, ever.
Woo. Moving on to number 3. This one might come as a shock to some, and to others might be like, "Oh my God, they existed." The number 3 spot is a big one to me, and it had to go to Tyson Kidd and Cesaro. Man, I could not stand Tyson Kidd in the beginning. I hated when Tyson Kidd and Cesaro first started tag teaming, coming down with their Beats by Dre headphones, and then something happened. It had to have been the night that they took on the New Day, and the fans, the New Day came out as faces. The fans started chanting "New Day sucks." This was the first night it caught on, and they called the audible and had a double turn in the ring with no authorization by the backstage, just feeding off the energy of the crowd. And that changed everything. For them to react to the fact that the fans did not like the New Day at the time, that gave the New Day all the gateway in the world to being what they are now. Because when you give the fans what they want in that sense, they will follow them till the end of time. And all this is thanks to Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, who, in their own right, were a very, very solid tag team, playing off each other's strengths and weaknesses in a flawless and phenomenal way, until Tyson Kidd's early demise and unfortunate retirement.
Early demise. He's not dead, folks, okay?
No.
In-ring demise.
But it was still early in his career. Too early.
Wait, he was super young.
If they were still, if Tyson Kidd was still wrestling and these guys were still a tag team, they would be up there with New Day and the Usos, probably having just as many reigns.
Oh, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, the double turn in the ring, it's like, that's a good example of, if you really are listening to the fans and if you have the faith in yourself, you can go against the script and actually make something better and improve your status. Now, again, Kidd and Cesaro didn't improve their status, but that's due to other circumstances. It has nothing to do with that. But you look at New Day, and like you said, without these two, where's New Day?
Yeah, Vince would have kept pushing them as faces, even though the fans hated them as faces.
Probably the biggest or second biggest tag team in the company right now. That's debatable between them and the Usos, but it's literally just them and the Usos.
Yeah.
As the biggest, right?
Yep. Otherwise, yeah, I would liken Sheamus and Cesaro to that if they were still tagging, which they're not.
No.
And Sheamus is back, so it's interesting that they're not tagging again. But it makes sense, I guess. WWE sucks anyway.
Yeah, they're not hitting home runs.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't know, but other than watching WrestleMania, which did not hit a home run, but as of recent years, I've come to expect that.
Yeah. We'll get into this more on in the night, but after Vince got WWE declared an essential service, I decided they're not essential for me to pay attention to anymore. But
yeah, I can kind of I can agree with that. It's not essential for me to take my time.
Yeah.
To do anything with them.
Let's watch the ratings continue to drop. Let's all unite right now and show them just how essential they are.
I tried that a year ago, and ratings went through the roof. So, fuck me.
Well, moving right on to number 2. This spot had to go to a stellar tag team that the world may or may not have forgotten. And if these guys would have got the proper push, they could have been just as big as Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, the Hardy Boys. They had everything but the stature, Fat Mac. And of course, I'm talking about the Brian Kendrick and Paul London.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, these guys in their blue outfits flying all over the place were ahead of their time in WWE, and I think that was their biggest downfall.
Blue outfits. I always remembered them in the white and black. I think London had the white and Kendrick had the black. I remember them just kind of as yin yang, but I think I can kind of remember them in the blue outfits now too.
Yeah. They were obviously on SmackDown.
Yeah. I mean, you just look at the two individuals and know they weren't on Raw.
Yeah.
Hello.
Live didn't exist yet, or that's where they would have been.
Or it would have been, yeah. For sure.
But these two, they could go and they could entertain. If they were a tag team and as young as they were today, as they were then, they would be on par with any tag team in the world, I think.
Oh, for sure. And both of them were just super talented solo. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
I actually wish WWE would have went along with their original name, the Hooligans.
Yeah.
Because I loved that name. I think they would have just gotten a little more drive as the Hooligans. Although I think they were in the wrong place and time for WWE at the time, like you mentioned. Nothing was going to happen, but...
You know, on the same list that the name Hooligans was on, Little Rascals was probably on, too.
That's
the thing. Vince looked at them, he said they're cool. Small guys, and he never thought about them again.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the reign is. I would have to look it up, and maybe I'll have time to look it up. I don't know, but I know that they were actually the longest reigning tag team champions until the New Day broke their record.
Yes. Which
New Day now holds. So it's like it was a team that very few people talked about. The definition of underrated. They were the longest reigning tag team champions ever. 2-time WWE tag team champions. They were over in is it England or Europe? I believe it's England. We'll say England. They were Insane Championship Wrestling tag team champs. And back in 2007, which is actually now, a generation ago, they actually won PWI's Tag Team of the Year. So these guys were so much the shit when they were there. And then became so much nothing. Like, so many people listening to this, Pacey, have no idea who we're talking about.
The longest tag team reign is because Vince forgot about the entire division while they had the belts.
Vince is notorious for not giving a shit about tag teams, so I would believe that.
Yeah.
I would definitely believe that.
Yeah, the sky was the limit for these guys, though, and they deserve so much more than what they got that I had to add them to this list.
I mean, they are, if you looked up in an encyclopedia the definition of underrated tag teams, you're going to see a picture of these two guys right there.
Yes.
Along with possibly, Pasty, the old school team of the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika Anoa'i.
Yes.
The team actually started up in Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling. This is way back in 1973, before most of our listeners, which include your hosts, Pasty White and Fat Mac, were born. But there they won the Stampede Tag Team Championships twice. And ask anybody who's ever worked for Stampede, being a champion there is not an easy thing to do no matter what division. They then went to Vancouver and won the tag team titles there. Then they spent the majority of the 70s, Pasty, in various NWA territories. Of course, NWA was spread out throughout the United States. Until 1979, when they joined the WWF. Once there, they won the tag team championships 3 times, believe it or not. And